Facebook is on. Recording is beginning. Here we are, folks. Welcome to History Matters, and so does coffee. Boy, do we have stuff to talk about today. But before we get to the stuff we're going to talk about today, I turn to my wonderful partner in crime, Annie, who will explain the rules of the game.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Annie Evans from New American History. I'm very excited for today's talk. It's been a really interesting week and there's a lot to do. The chat is already lit up, but here's how this works. If this is your first time joining us, you picked a great time. We're going to engage in the chat, whether you're in Facebook land or here on Zoom with us. But if you have a question about today's topic, we need you to put that down below in the Q&A because I will be back in about 30 minutes and we'll be taking some of those questions.
Wonderful. And if you are here for the first time, please say so in chat. Make sure that you're responding to everyone, and you will get a robust welcome. Oh, I forgot to even look. Yes, robust welcome. Thank you, Daniel. I know I say that every time. I'm so predictable. Thank you, Carolee. It's our 290th, really? First timer, Susan. Welcome, Susan. Okay, our 290th episode. Holy moly. Anyway, it's our 290th episode. So some folks have been coming here the entire time, and they are the most robust welcomers. So Susan, welcome, and anyone else who's a first timer. Okay, so obviously, political historian here saying we need to talk about what happened on Tuesday. Fascinating on many, many levels. You don't have to be a political historian to find what happened on Tuesday fascinating. But let me just note, and this is far from a complete list of things, but it's just some of the things I pulled together this morning as I was preparing here to speak. Things that happened on Tuesday. Okay, so we had the first woman governor of Virginia. We had the first Muslim women lieutenant governor of Virginia. We had the first Black woman mayor of Albany. The city of Detroit elected its first woman mayor. Virginia House of Delegates flipped 13 seats. Of course, here in New York, mayor of New York, the first Muslim and South Asian mayor. We had even the Georgia Public Service Commission. I'm telling you, it's far from complete, but it's random and shows you the range. Apparently, and this is totally random, but there are school districts that were known for being conservative culture war districts, like the Central Bucks School District of Pennsylvania, and that's gone. Moms for Liberty lost all 31 contested school board races. Maine rejected an attempt to tighten voting rules. California approved Proposition 50, which allows redistricting in response to what Texas has already begun to do. There was a quote, I think Heather used it in her comment on the election, and it's wonderful. So, because it kind of states it, there's a legal scholar, I hope I'm saying his name correctly, John Pfaff, Pfaff, who wrote, every race, it's basically been every race, governors, mayors, long-held Republican dog catchers, school boards, water boards, flipped a dungeon master in a rural Iowa, what is it, Dungeons and Dragons Club, state senators, state representatives, a janitor in Duluth, state justices, 3 Republican Uber drivers, just everything. Okay, so boy, were there things said in that election, many messages sent. And that's what I want to talk about today. Not necessarily just the messages, but what are some of the things that that election taught us, in addition to the fact that Americans have very strong views about what this administration has been doing, and they spoke up with their votes on Tuesday night. But let's talk about some of the things that struck me about this election. And one of the first things that struck me, and it struck me in part because of comments, maybe even Tuesday night, from some of the longtime Democratic Party stalwarts like Chuck Schumer and maybe Hakeem Jeffries, who said, the Democratic Party is back. And my visceral response to that is, this was not about the Democratic Party. This is a particularly fascinating thing to me. This was not about the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party didn't really do very much all in all This was about Democratic voters. And it was about people, local races, candidates focusing on local races, local needs, local constituencies, people's wants and demands and needs. Again, speaking as a political historian, fascinating to me. This was not about the Democratic Party. It was about Democrats. It was about voters. And it was about candidates very much focused on the needs and demands of where they were. So you get sort of moderate, middle of the road Democrats winning in places like Virginia. And then you get Zoran Mamdani here in New York, which is not a middle of the road Democrat. You had all kinds of different candidates for all kinds of different reasons winning all over the place. This to me is fascinating because I think, largely speaking here, we assume, because this is what it's been like for most of American history, that we've got two parties, and they're parties. We don't think about what it means to be a party. We assume we know what it means to be a party, and the names change, the values change, the policies change, but in one way or another, we assume, generally speaking, there are two parties banging up against each other. And this election, interestingly, I think it raises questions about what a party is, what a party does, where the parties are now, and what they should be doing. When we're in a moment, as we are now, where one party has largely spurned a lot of small d democratic norms, we are no longer in a moment where we have two equal sides banging up against each other. We're in a different kind of moment. And because of that, I think some old school modes of conducting politics, which assume that a top-down party organization can control and win, and it's the way to go. This election showed that, at least for right now, that's not necessarily the way to go. This was in many ways a bottom up election. And so, we got diversity in many ways in the outcome of this election. And in part, obviously, that has to do with who was given power. I'm going to come back to that point in a moment. But also the kinds of political ideas and stances, radical or not, the variety, the diversity among the politics of the people given power, that is really noteworthy. And that says a lot. Again, to get back to where I started on, this is only my first point here, that this isn't about the Democratic Party. Actually, there's a quote I gathered this morning. Let me find it here from AOC. Um, she said, she was asked, like, what does this say about the face of the Democratic Party? And she said, I don't think that our party needs to have one face. Our country does not have one face. It's about all of us as a team together, and we all understand the assignment. But the idea, it's a long-term assumption, right? That the Democrats have always been about diversity in many meanings, but in part, a wide coalition with different kinds of people with different kinds of needs and demands and wants. And sometimes that is seen as a drawback because it's hard to pull that kind of a group of people into unity. And, again, traditionally speaking, people say, well, the Republicans are much more sort of organized and focused and not really embracing diversity in a lot of different ways. Makes it easier to organize and potentially sometimes easier to politically win. But what AOC is saying here, and what this election is showing in an interesting way is, and who was it? Was it Cuomo who said diversity is a weakness? I don't want to, someone high up, who I believe was a Democrat, said diversity is a weakness because people, are apart. They aren't necessarily together. And part of what this election showed is that embracing diversity and thinking about it not from a top-down level, but from a bottom-up level can be a real strength if you're embracing it and not fighting it or trying to like control it in some way. So I'm very much speaking off the top of my head here, but I think there are some important lessons to be learned right now about party politics at this moment, and specifically about the Democratic Party and how they conduct their politics at this moment. And it will be interesting to see if people in the party, capital P, can hear and can see what's going on right now. Because, and this is, I think, another aspect of what we just saw in the election. This is really a kind of transformative moment in party politics for a whole bunch of reasons, and I won't go into them. Some of them are very obvious and have to do with what people are or aren't allowing to take place in the realms of high up power. Above and beyond that, again, thinking about the GOP, well, I don't know if they're so anymore, the grand old party. Um, what they're doing now certainly has long, long roots. But we're engaged in a different kind of politics in part because people in power are rejecting and spurning some pretty basic ways in which a small d democratic politics functions. If you're in that kind of a world where the system itself is not necessarily being accepted or kept, then yeah, you're not in a world where conventional capital O old party politics is going to work in the same way. And to me, that's one of the lessons of this election. And I'm sure that when people are writing about what just happened, one of the things they're going to be talking about is the ways in which, if you bounce around the country and look locally, state level, smaller than a state level, you're going to see so many different patterns, most of them leading to blue candidates winning, but the levels, what do I want to say? The shades of blue. There are a pretty wide range of shades of blue that won in this election, and I think that matters profoundly. And I think that people need to think about how they're engaging in party politics on a high level. And I think on the us level, on the voter level, we get to think about what we want our candidates to be, which leads to another major point I want to make. Change in leadership happens from a bottom-up level, meaning change in leadership happens because voters give different kinds of leaders power. And what I was thinking about a lot as the results became increasingly clear on Tuesday night, and I know you will be secretly or not so secretly laughing, but yes, this is what I was thinking about. I was thinking about the 1850s because in the 1850s, and ironically, this is about the rise of the Republican Party. But what you saw, beginning with the rise of the Republican Party as a party, they didn't exist before. They come about in the mid 1850s, and they announced themselves to be a different kind of party with different kinds of candidates. They promote themselves and announce themselves as, first of all, they're there to fight the slave power. So they're a party centered on not simply what they believe in, but what they're pushing back against, which very much is the dynamic that we just experienced. But also, they said, you know what, we're different kinds of candidates. And I write about this in my most recent book, The Field of Blood on Congress, right? These Republican congressmen come to Congress and they stand up on the floor of the House and Senate and say, we are a different kind of congressman. And they say that in part in response to Southerners who are trying to silence and bully and sort of push out of the way Northerners who are getting in the way of the promotion in one way or another of or the preservation of slavery. And these newly elected Republican members of Congress say, no, 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 we're a different kind of congressman because we are not going to just sit down and let things happen. And Northerners who've been here before now, sure, like they've been working in their own way, but largely they allowed things to go the way that they went. They didn't put it this way, but speaking from my vantage point, when you look at how Northerners in Congress were operating, they very much spoke a lot. Something horrible would happen, and they would say, wait, the rules. And that was the dynamic. Actually, John Quincy Adams even had a name for that moment, right? So a Southerner would do something outrageous, and a Northerner would say, wait, the rules. And John Quincy Adams said, the lamentation speeches have begun. Lamentation speeches, the Northerners saying, but wait, the rules. And I'm not saying it's good to abandon rules. And I'm not saying, everyone, like all wheels off the bus, wild craziness. I'm not saying that at all. But you can't simply sit and say this isn't the way we do things in moments of intense change. You need to look at the moment and respond to the moment and listen to your constituents and listen to the voters. So in the mid 1850s, people say, you know what, we want different kinds of leaders. We want leaders who are going to stand up. We want leaders who are going to behave differently. We want our representatives to be different kinds of people. And so they give power, the voters give power to a different kind of leader, a different kind, in the case of my book, a different kind of congressman. The change comes from the bottom up. And I'm not saying, and this is always the problem with talking about my most recent book, because then it's very easy to say, yeah, Joanne, that was great. And then we had a civil war. So I'm not saying, yay, like let's become violent. Yay, a civil war is about to come. I'm actually not saying that at all. Um, the mug today will reflect on this when we get to the mug at the end of my comments today. But what I am saying is change comes from the bottom up. And this election showed that in the many different kinds of localized victories that had one common theme, blue, but there were a lot of different shades of blue. And all of those different shades of blue came from candidates focused on the people they were serving and the people being served speaking up and voting. Voting in part for what they wanted and voting in a large part for what they didn't want. That was one of the big messages of this election, right? And it's obvious, but it needs to be stated. What we saw in part in this election was Americans of all kinds saying, hey, you know what? Here's our moment to speak up. And guess what? We don't like what's going on. And we're going to say something about it. We're going to vote against it. So it's easy to forget, but important to remember. Voters were voting for things, which is you can see in the wide range of candidates, and they were voting against what's going on in a powerful kind of a way, which is why things are being flipped and there are all kinds of firsts. That's people really stepping up and saying, this is what we want, and this is not what we want. Now, all elections are supposed to do that in one way or another, but in a time of extreme politics, never mind extreme contingency, but extreme politics, that can be a really extreme message. So that's some of what we just saw in this election. But I just lost track of where I was going and I'm gonna lose it. Um, I lost my train of thought, folks, because I told a student last week in my one of my seminars, an undergraduate was really embarrassed when she forgot her train of thought. And I said, oh no, it happens to me all the time. And then it happened to me Wednesday. And I just like now, I was like, and I said, now you must feel better, student, because I just got lost. My larger point here, and the point I suppose overall that I want to make, is just that there are several things that are important to bring out of this election. And one, as I said, is rethinking the Democratic Party, rethinking what it is and how it should operate. Whether that will happen, I don't know. Us rethinking, those of us who are capital D Democrats, rethinking what it means to be a Democrat and how we want to operate within a larger political realm, rethinking or focusing on what we want and how to get it, realizing that this is where my thought was going. And I spoke about this in recent weeks. I don't know when. People kept saying that the No Kings marches don't mean anything. It's big deal. You know, a bunch of people go into the street, march for a day and dress up in costumes, big deal. And I kept saying, how do you build a movement if you're not visibly doing something to rev people up, to show them that there's spirit, to show them that there's a wide range and big numbers of people with a feeling, a strong sense of conviction about what they want and what they don't want. Now, I'm not saying you can draw a straight line between the No Kings protests and this election, but what I am saying is You build a movement with moments like that. They're important. They're part of how you get people engaged and involved, and you get them to understand that they're not alone sitting in their living room like me right now, thinking what they're thinking and being outraged and having no power. Right? Those demonstrations, those protests are important because they help, at least, lead to moments like the current moment, this week, this election. And what this election is a reminder of, and maybe this is the most important thing of all, is we the people have power. We do. There's been so much, and I have been ranting against the doomers for a very, very long time at this point because doomers have been very loud, and it's been a number of years now. It's all over. There's no hope. Um, there have been, moments of brightness, and there are and continue to be moments of pretty bleak moments. However, the fact of the matter is, we the people matter. And this election not only gave power to all kinds of people and told them in no uncertain terms, this is what we want. Like, we want you. We don't want this. We want you. Now let's see what you can do, which now we will watch and see. But this election, once again, I love, man, folks, I need my coffee. Um, this election, in no uncertain terms, is a very strong statement about now I'm back. My thought is back. I'm sorry, folks. There's construction outside. I'm really tired. I'm still not at 100% health. But this isn't a really important. Oh, thank you. All the thumbs up. Thank you for the encouragement, guys. Is that we the people matter. That all elections show that. But at this moment in time, given where we are now and given some of the challenges that we face, it's so important to, I just saw a little frog go up. I love you guys. Um, it's important for us to remember and know that we the people matter and that elections are us, which gets back to where I began, which is this idea that that was not about the Democratic Party. What we just saw was not about the Democratic Party. It was about Democratic voters. It was about the fact that this was a localized election sending a national message, right? Lots of localized elections, lots of different kinds of candidates, lots of firsts, lots of flipping of things, much diversity in many ways. But the national message is so clear, so clear. And that's how diversity can add up to message and strength. That's another important thing that I think in many different ways this election really showed. So I know there's more I want to say. And as I said, I'm probably operating at about 80% today, but it's an excited 80%. Many, many, many fascinating things about the election. To me, as a political historian, I remain kind of focused on the idea that the Democratic Party, and again, I had that response was a visceral response to seeing some of the old guard, like Schumer, saying, yay, the Democratic Party is back. And even without even pausing, my response was, this isn't about that. This is not about the Democratic Party. Now, that's an amazing thing to say after this kind of an election, and I think it's really true, and I think it requires some really serious thought by people who are in the Democratic Party. We shall see what happens. But this should be, a transitional moment in how Democrats are thinking about how they do what they do, who should be doing that, who should have louder voices, and who should have quieter voices. All of this needs to be thought about. And now coffee mugs. Okay. Mug, mug, mug. So for those of you who are here, now I'm getting the mug chance. For those of you who are here for the first time, for 289 previous weeks, I have a mug that in some way or other connects to the theme that we're discussing. And this week's, I know I've used this one before, but it was the one that seemed appropriate for now. It says, history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. And I pulled this because I was thinking of the 1850s. Actually, interestingly, the Gilded Age is also somewhat appropriate given
Yeah.
the moment that we're in. But the larger point was um, the lesson one of the lessons I felt in this election having to do with bottom up power and people electing the kinds of leaders they want rather than the kinds of leaders they're being given. That's really important. And that's something that history has a lot to say about. I think I've used this before. Someone says new for us.
Yeah.
I think
No,
I've
I've
used
seen it before. It's a good
it. Yeah.
one.
Yeah. But it is a good one. And someone gave me this mug.
I think that was from the mug swap in Salt Lake, maybe, because I
Could
remember
be.
seeing it
Could
in
be.
person.
If someone wants to pipe up, let me move my notes out of the way.
There used to
Um,
be a mug spreadsheet. I don't remember who kept it,
there
but
used to be a mug
I think it might have
spreadsheet.
been Jenny, but I'm not sure.
That is a Dale
Oh, it's a
mug.
Dale
It's
mug.
Dale.
Oh, Dale.
Okay,
Thank you,
Dale.
Dale.
I was going to guess that, Dale. So anyway, yes, it's an
Awesome.
excellent. Excuse
All
me.
right. We have, as you can imagine, a lot of questions. I'm going to start with our good buddy Pax. Pax asks, how do we keep the people pressure up after the election?
Hmm.
Mm.
Um, People are asking for actually, let me open chat. How do we keep the we the people pressure up?
They have that in all caps.
That's good.
The people.
You know what's funny about this is that I have been saying we. Where are we? The we is weak. The we needs to be strong. I've been chanting we for years and years and years to the point that um, my friend and graduate advisor Peter Onuf has made it a joke of sorts. He's like, "So any we today?" It's like yes, yes, it's all we. But yes, how do we keep it up? Well, thank you. See, Pax is acknowledging this. Thank you. In part, it has to do with what just happened and people making that point. That was a we the people moment. Really. I mean, the bottom upness of it, people need to realize that. And part of one way for people to realize that is for us to keep being active locally, for us to keep speaking up locally, not to feel that if, things aren't happening on a national level, that means somehow that things aren't happening. Bottom up matters, local matters. Many people have been saying this for a long time, but this election shows in concrete terms that matters. And I think that's so important. I think that's so important right now for people to see. Now, that's not a concrete, well, right. Pax says, I just don't want folks to think that now they can leave it up to the Democrats. No, that's
No,
precisely it. This was not about the Democratic Party. This was about us. This was about people speaking up and saying different things under a kind of umbrella of blue, right? So hopefully there'll be local realizations and just the diversity writ large, add whatever meaning, diversity of kinds of blueness, diversity of the colors of people given power, diversity in the fact that all of these women and people of color gained power. I mean, I'm getting very excited because I was very excited Tuesday night. All the ways in which that election sent a strong message, not just to the people with power, but to the voters. Um, that's crucially, crucially important.
yep, I agree. And I loved that question as our kickoff. Thank you, Pax. Okay, Seth Bauer asks, what happens to diversity when it comes to governing and re-election? The strength of the GOP is they are a solid voting bloc.
Right. Well, that's always been the story, right? The GOP is a solid voting bloc. They, believe what they believe, and the Democrats are this like crazy, diverse bunch that doesn't operate that way, and that is a fatal flaw, and that always chips away at Democratic victories. That's why I think that's right. And Pax is very absolutely on point that the GOP is not necessarily a solid bloc anymore, although there's a solidity there grounded on, I won't go into details, but there's a different kind of solidity there than, boy, we all believe in this together. There's a solidity of survival there in a different kind of a way, personal and otherwise. But that's why I think one of the ways in which this election is important is that it shows that there is solidity. There's a block of people who can be voting along similar lines against things together. You can join and I don't think you can survive long. You can last for a while. I don't think you can survive long as a party that's just, the party of no, right? The party of what you're against. I think you do have to be for something to be a party that gets and keeps power. But I think both parts of that equation are important. And I think that's some of what we're seeing too. And I think that's how you can be a party of diversity with multiple meanings, but aiming at that and voting against what's trying to eliminate that kind of diversity. I think, again, the dynamic of this election is going to be really important for people to remember, and to remember going forward, not just in the next big top-down election, but in every local decision-making moment. We the people need to realize that we the people just said something really powerful and it had a huge, huge impact. Certainly more than in a million years I would have expected as an outcome of an election. We the peeps, says Linda. Rosie's very quiet, but yes, we the peeps.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Seth. That was another great one. Okay. Laura Miner says, how to educate the public about history, both the story and the discipline. Would it help if people knew how history is done, techniques, standards, contrast with propaganda? So it looks like she's feeling like because people are lacking in history, and I'm going to throw in civic education, maybe that's how we got in this mess. Maybe it's how we get out of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is a very good point that, and it gets back to um, propaganda and misinformation and all of the things that deliberately lead people astray in what they're thinking or in what they're believing. And yes, Carolee, lacking empathy, right? We live at a moment right now where many people are actually anti-empathy. I mean, I'm, yeah, many people appear to be anti-empathy, which is a shocking thing to say, but that is true. Um, oh, that's nice of you to say, Annie.
It's so true. It is
I
so
think
true.
it's very true that um, I don't know the answer to the question of how to, spread out more history and more civics. I will say that I can certainly see, even just among my colleagues, when we started, 290 weeks ago, when we started this, there weren't a lot of people doing this, right? Historians stepping forward and saying, I will now engage with the public. I've been doing this for years because it felt to me that at least one way in which I can get people to think about history and how that is shaping our politics. But now, there are a good number of other historians who are doing the same thing. So part of what we're seeing now is historians actually piping up and engaging with the public in a way that when I applied for grad school, it was scorned, right? I said I want to be a school that shall go nameless that I applied to, and I said I'm interested in public-minded history, and I was essentially told, well, then go someplace else,
Yeah.
right? It was just scorned. That's not, what we do as academics. Blah, 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 rhubarb, 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 rhubarb. That's not so much the case anymore. And it's partly a product of the fact that we are in a dire moment. And in this kind of moment, many historians are realizing that people who understand our history and understand, as you said, Annie, civics, have a power just to speak up and put it out there for people to hear it and see it and think about it.
But
Um,
I hope how many did you say are in that class? 400, 500 students?
oh, there's about 400 total. It's like
Yeah.
830. Yeah.
But like half of them at least are students.
Yeah.
So imagine if every single one of those students and then the other ones in the community each told one friend to watch the video replay,
Right.
right? I keep telling people part of this pushback is adults are feeling uncomfortable when their fourth grader, seventh grader, 10th grader comes home and starts talking about what they're learning in history because they didn't learn it that way. And it's almost like the kids have to reteach the parents because the parents didn't get it by omission. And that's where some of this uncomfortableness. So I don't know if you watched the thing that David did Tuesday with Ed and the other two scholars, based on that New Republic series that David's been promoting. But doing stuff like that, where the historians are meeting with the public, answering their questions directly, doing what you do every Friday for us, I feel like that's part of how we're going to combat and get out of this is think about how many people in this chat know more about history now just from tuning in every Friday. And everybody watching your class,
Right.
and for years that class will be available now. I feel
Right.
like that's education's always the solution, I feel like.
I think that education is always the solution, and I think that, and we've talked about this before, um, and I hate to put it this way, but an upside of the pandemic is online accessibility, right? It's the fact that now, in ways we never could have imagined before, we can do this sort of thing online and reach thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people on in one sitting and then have it be out there for many, many, many thousands more.
Yeah.
Every once in a while I'll go and I'll look um, at something there was a recent History Matters episode. Maybe it was the one on the White House wrecking ball and the
Mm,
destruction of the swing. I think 11,000 people have watched that already or
yep.
something. I don't know. Anyway, the fact of the matter is that technology and democracy, folks. The interaction of technology and politics can be, as much as we're talking about propaganda here, can be a real strength for democracy because democracy is a conversation between people with power and the people who give them that power. And at its heart, and an election is a kind of part of that conversation. It's a conversation. And any technology that shapes that conversation shapes democracy. And sometimes that can be for the worse, but sometimes that can really be for the better. And I think the ways in which much broader and more diverse publics can be reached in this way, so that history and civics and questions about what's going on can be spread, that's huge. That's huge. We talked about this. So part of the course that I'm teaching with David Blight and Beverly Gage, we do a weekly podcast associated with it. And we recorded one yesterday. And we were talking about this very fact we were talking about the Tuesday's lecture was about the progressive era and Thursday's lecture was about the New Deal because that's how quickly we have to romp through American history.
Mhm.
But what we were talking about, the reading for the week was Walter Lippmann's Public Opinion. So what we were talking about was ideas about public opinion and how technology can shape public opinion. And that's not a new idea, but that's a huge, huge idea. And the importance of public opinion and the ways in which, some of what was going on in the early 20th century was using technologies to shape people's views in ways that it had been harder to do or had taken longer to do in the past.
I think about I'd always talked about the Valley of the Shadow, and people made fun of him when he started digitizing all those records. They're like, "Man, what are you doing? Nobody's going to use that stupid internet thing, right?" And luckily for all of us, he said, "No, I disagree. I think it has a lot of potential." And I mean, look at the digital humanities now. When you said, how many did you say have watched that? 11,000 have watched that one
Yeah, in
episode.
2 weeks or something, I
Yeah.
think 11,000 or something like that.
So I'm working on an article about the redlining map. You guys were talking about the New Deal, and I was looking at data. Over 14 million people have looked at that one map online. One map.
Right.
And those maps were buried in the National Archives basement for decades. Nobody even knew they existed. And now everybody in the world can see them.
Yeah, well,
It's
so that's
incredible.
or at some point was it during it? Maybe it was before Trump's election as president the first time. I've told this story before, I know. I did what you're not supposed to do, which is I woke up in the morning and then immediately picked up my phone and tweeted something and said, I don't think people realize what they lose when they lose democracy.
Mm.
And this was at a time when people were not thinking that way and they were, you know, acting as though I was, nuts for saying it, et cetera, et cetera. And and not a very long time after that, I was at a conference and I was curious and I looked to see the numbers associated with that statement. And I don't remember how many, the time that lapsed between when I posted it and the conference, but it wasn't a long amount of time. And 3 million people had seen that. 3 million people had seen that statement, right? And it's just me lying in bed writing a sentence,
Mhm.
right? And people reading it and responding to it. Now, at the time, the response was, and I remember being horrified. This was so early. It might have been, like I said, I think it was before Trump won that first election. There were three kinds of responses I got to that statement about people not knowing what they lose when they lose democracy. Some people said, "You're right." And I guess I took that for granted. Silly me that a lot of people would think that. Some people said, uh, we've never had democracy here anyway, so maybe we need something different on the left. And then people on the right said, what do we need democracy for anyway? Is it so great? Right. So the left and the right commentary really, taught me a lot in not a good way, but millions of people saw it and their responses really showed, again, as a historian, if I were writing about that moment, the responses of 3 million people to a statement like that, and that's pretty revealing. Just like this election, in many ways, on many levels, is for historians, um, not just political historians, but for historians generally speaking, uh, it's going to teach so much about this moment. But as sort of Pax suggested earlier, it has to teach us so much about this moment and who we are and where we are, and that we cannot have a sort of doom mentality. There are horrible things going on right now. I
Yep.
acknowledge that. We're in a horrible, dark moment. But hope exists in many, 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 many ways. And Tuesday night was like a big blimp balloon saying, remember, it's nothing's over. It's not over. Don't assume it's over. There's hope of change, and that's how change happens. Bottom up, we the people.
Yeah.
Really important to remember.
Yep. Okay, we got to get back to questions. People are
I'm
like,
sorry.
questions,
I'm on the
questions. I know,
soapbox.
I know.
I'm on the
We're on a
soapbox.
rant here. All right. Kat Coyote would like to know, she'd like to find ways to convince white women, 50% of them voted against their own interest on Tuesday, she says, that they are cutting their own throats.
That is a hard thing to address. That's a
Mhm.
long-standing pattern.
Yeah.
In that, historically speaking, white women sometimes vote for a regime or power holders who they feel secure with, even if it means they're secure in a secondary position, right? So they cut their own throats because they're basically saying, I don't, this feels safe. So I'm going to go with security over liberty. This is Hamilton, right?
This is how we
Hamilton,
got stuck with Youngkin, was women in Loudoun County suburbs.
white women, white women,
Yes. Yes.
basically saying this feels safe to me, and that's scary, and that I only deserve to be here anyway, right? I don't need this. Like that. How many of you saw the headline in the New York Times yesterday about how, have women ruined the workplace?
Oh, I didn't see that, but I'll go look it up.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
Right. Someone give the exact quote. It was oh no, yes. People are like, yes. It was something like, have women ruined the workplace? Um, right. And you know, first of all, who asked the question, number one? Number two, what brilliant person thought that that needed to go in a newspaper? And number three, to me, that's a response to this election. This, because it came right after, right? So the election is like, we're going to give power to lots of women and to lots of people of color. And then the New York Times says, many women have ruined the workplace. It again, as a historian, those things are going right next to each other in a chapter. Yeah,
Was that near the article that said Mandami's entire transition team was all women? It'd be kind of funny to put those two
I
side by
know it would
side
have
in the
been.
same newspaper.
It's someone who just said, Kathleen, did liberal feminism ruin the workplace? They changed the headline, and the original one was, Did women ruin the workplace? There was
Mm.
such a scream about that that they were like, oh, this will be better. Did liberal feminism ruin the workplace? It was like,
Wow.
yep, not any better. Yeah. So at any rate, yeah, well, right. The question isn't even, as Noreen is asking, how did that get past the editor? Um, the editor approved it. It didn't have to sneak past anybody.
Yeah.
Someone wrote it, people saw it, they approved it, and they made it a headline. But that's, to me, in part, really a response to the moment that we're in. So that shows you the power of that election, of the feelings and thoughts and drive behind that election. It shows you that we, the people, have power, and we, the people, gave power to women. Shock, gasp. The people who many people are trying to just silence and shove us out of the way.
Yeah, I
So,
like Ellen's comment. She says somebody suggested that every woman who works at the New York Times should call in, should walk out. I think they should just call in sick, and see how the men run things by themselves. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No. Well, and it's true. Tina says clickbait makes the owners money, which on the one hand is true. On the other hand, you go too far with clickbait and you just get hate.
Yeah.
This went too far, which is why they changed the headline, like, oh no, liberal feminism will be better. No, no, you already, and then I saw again yesterday people saying, well, I didn't cut the times off before, but I'm going to do it today. So it did reach people. I don't know if any of you, there's a song that someone wrote, a TikTok talk video about Mamdani that does have a Hamilton vibe. Someone just said,
Uh,
yeah, go
yeah,
find it
I'm not
because
on TikTok much.
I'm
I mean,
not either
when the
these
kids
days.
send me something, I watch it, but it's just not my thing.
Me
Uh,
neither, but it made its way in other. I
yeah.
only saw it on Blue
People
Sky.
repost it on other platform. I might.
That's precisely
Yeah.
it.
All right. We've got
Okay, I'm
a
sorry.
lot
Then
of
shut up.
questions. We're
More
running out of
questions. More
time.
questions. Yes.
Okay. Dave says Tuesday's election results were blue and great, but I wonder what Dr. Freeman thinks about the SCOTUS hearing about the case on the Trump tariffs. Could they possibly finally rein him in, especially if it's 7-2? But he also says he's given up on Thomas and Alito.
Yeah. Right. So there's the Supreme Court being the Supreme Court. I mean, I suppose um, Neil Katyal talking before the Supreme Court and attacking the tariffs again was a moment of like pushback. There's pushback. It's hard uh, to feel cheery about the Supreme Court these days because what did I see this morning? Someone saying, how did Trump get the idea? Oh, it was, Trump credit cards and Trump wine and Trump, being sold like military websites and things like that. And, how did people think that, why do they think that's acceptable? It's like, why do they think that's acceptable? Acceptable because the Supreme Court said that if he's doing it in a way that has something to do with his job, he can basically do anything. The Supreme Court said this is a new understanding of the president. You know what makes me bonkers about this is that when that decision came out, and I know I've said this before, and I'll say it fast and then we'll go back to the questions, but that one decision fundamentally changed the nature of our government. And I said it at the time, Heather said it at the time, we talked to each other at the time and said, people don't understand what just happened. And we've been living in the cloud caused by that since then. Okay, I'm stopping. I'm shutting myself up.
Yeah. Okay, our good buddy Troy says, by all means, let's celebrate the wins, but let's bear in mind authoritarians are always in the lab of politics looking to cook up the next more palatable iteration of Trumpism. We have to convince the majority of fellow humans our well-being must always come first before enriching the new. How many of this change is likely attributable to people being comfortable with bigotry as long as it doesn't impoverish or embarrass them too much?
Well, for sure. I think that that's true on a lot of levels among many, many people that that's true, right? People are okay with something until it affects them in a certain kind of a way. I think it's simplistic to say when it touches their wallet, it becomes something different. I do think obviously that's a huge point, but I think people now saying it all comes down to the economy. It's not just the economy at this point. It's bigger than that. But yes, I think repeat the specific question because I don't want to not answer the question.
He asked, let me go back to it. How much of this change is likely attributable to people still being comfortable with bigotry as long as it doesn't impoverish or embarrass them too much?
Right.
Like, how much
No,
bigotry can you tolerate?
so much right. Well, and the larger point, the important point, it was interesting. So I posted a video. You can go to my YouTube channel and see it. Like Tuesday night, I went on and posted a video because I sort of felt that I needed to do that. Saying some of what I'm saying here is that the message was sent and it matters. And what I said then, and I didn't use that word this morning, but I will now, I called it fuel related to this question. I wasn't saying, and I'm not saying, yippity doo dah, we're done. Just like when Obama was elected, people were like, racism's done. It's like, are you nuts? I'm not saying, like, yay, we did it at all. And that was why I said what we just got was fuel, because this isn't the end of anything. This is fuel for an ongoing fight, right? Fuel for an ongoing need. So celebrating is good. And I think we deserve to have a moment where we're like, yay, we the people, we're still here. But nothing ended on Tuesday night. It just kind of, some things were woken up or revived. So I encourage you to go find my little, it's like 7 minutes long little video. I use the word fuel over and over and over again. People still were like irked that they took my um, response to be somehow saying, "Oh, I guess we're done now." Which I would never say, but that's an important point to make, is that we deserve a moment to say yay, but that doesn't mean that we now sit down and say job done. Job just starting, but that was an important, again, that was fuel of a new kind, or at least a kind we haven't had in a long time. And as I said during my 30 minutes of comments, of a kind that at least you could say, in the same way that people point to marches and say, big deal, it doesn't matter. You could point to this and say, okay, nice, like we had a good election. So what? They add up. It means something. The messages mean something, and they mean something not just however much they do or don't affect people with power. In a way, the most important aspect of the election and the protest is the impact they have on people being inspired to stand up and speak up.
Yeah. All right. We have so many questions and
I
so
know,
little
in only a couple
time.
minutes, but I know I keep
Um,
trying to shut myself up, folks. I'm sorry.
yeah,
I'm again, the political historian in me is like,
I know. I know. Um, okay. Cece asks, voting in our local elections was hard because I knew none of the candidates and I had to do research, which is to say, democracy is hard. Do you think people will now do the work more widely since what has happened affects so many?
I think at the very least, people could understand that in a way that they might have thought no longer was true, that what they do matters, right? I mean, I really do think, and I understand why some people at a certain point might think, well, here we are, and these people have power in the way that they have power, and there's nothing we can do. Now what? And we see all these bad things. We see the video of what the heck ICE is doing on the streets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you feel powerless and you feel that there's nothing to be done. And at the very least, what we're seeing is that there are things to be done. And I think, again, I think that matters. Thank you, David. David says, don't apologize for being on the soapbox. I know, but I want your questions, more questions, less soapbox.
All right. Thank you, Cece. Susan Novak says, am I wrong to think that this election was more about what we don't want than what we do want? And she specifies Trump and his Reich, as she called them.
I think it was both. But I do think that the idea that a big part of this election was what people don't want is very true. And that's not always the case. But what people have a really strong sense right now of what they don't want, and they haven't necessarily had a way to express that. And some of what we saw on Tuesday was a pent up need to say we don't like this. So yeah, I think that was a big part of what we saw, but I don't think that's all that we saw. I think back to um I guess it was Trump's first run for president when they didn't have a platform. Does anyone remember that? When at the Republican convention, they basically said, we don't have a platform, just support
Yeah.
Trump.
Yeah,
And
just
again,
our platform is we worship Donald, basically.
again, as a political historian, I was with a group of historians and we just like, what? So that was a moment where people were just saying, we actually don't care about policy or anything else. It's about this person. I don't think that what the Democrats just did was, well, we're just against that person. And the way that you can see that is all the different ways in which people said we're against that. Moderate Democrats, radical Democrats. People weren't just saying no. They were saying no, and here's what we want. So I think that no is a really important part of that election. And I think it sent a strong message. How that message will be taken, I don't know, as far as people with power right now. But I think the no is a huge part of it. But I think this is what we do want is an equally important part of it.
Daniel asks, how much longer will the current GOP cling to Trump? It seems he can't believe he's saying this. Marjorie Taylor Greene represents more of where they need to go.
I'm not going to comment on her. It is an interesting moment because it's getting harder and harder to deny the fact that he's just checked out. And certainly if what you've been doing is hanging on to his coattails, thinking that's the key to power, you might be thinking twice about that now. And I don't think Vance offers the same to Republicans, never mind other things besides that. But so I don't know. I mean, again, this is an interesting maybe transformative, but also just challenging moment for the Republicans. I don't know how they're going to respond, and it is worth saying they may very well respond by being more restrictive, more offensive, more violent. I don't know, and that's worth putting out there. They may respond as almost as one would expect them to respond by being worse because they feel backed into a corner. I don't know. But the counter side of that is they may be responding in a bad way, but they're responding against people who have a sense of their strength right now. And that's important too. That's part of why whatever they do is in response to the fact that the people just spoke up really loudly, and the people were not, favoring them. The response to that, I don't know what that will be. We will see.
Yeah. All right, we're a little after 11. We still have 11 questions. We got to 9 of them.
Okay.
Up to you. Do we want to do one or two more, or do we
Let's
want
do
to?
one or two more. And in this case, I know I say maybe next week, but given where we are, in this time, I'm thinking maybe actually next week will make sense since there's so
Yeah.
much. But
Yeah.
let's try one more and see where.
Um, okay. So this woman's from Devin Paul says systemic changes to our political system are needed. At what point should political leaders begin to air ideas for political system reform, such as the Supreme Court, the filibuster, gerrymandering, voting rights to all the voters?
I think we need to think about that and we need to talk about that. I don't know if this is the moment when that happens. I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying like I don't know, meaning no, it isn't. I'm saying I don't know. I do think there needs to be change of several different kinds. I don't know if the time to do that kind of change is sort of right now in the middle of the heat of, I suppose, battle or not. I don't know. But I think, yes, as you put it, a reset is needed, some changes are needed. That's going to be fraught, right? That because if you're opening the air to change is can be unsteady, and change can go in a bad as well as a good direction. I have said this for a long time that in times of extreme contingency, there I got it in today. In times of extreme contingency, yes, things can go very badly, but they can also, you can get positive change. So how that change happens or when that change happens, I can't say, but it has to happen for sure. And it might be that the moment that we are unfortunately living through right now may open a pathway to making that kind of positive change.
Yeah. All right. I'm trying to find one that.
You know, that we might be
Okay.
able to answer.
Okay, Linda has one. She said she was kind of disappointed in Schumer and Jeffries' response to Tuesday night saying the Dems are back. And she said it kind of took the wind out of her sails. She was hopeful that they remind them that the party will die if they will die without shifting their beliefs. She wants to know how they force the party to update. And she says, for example, AOC is a person who really gets the public engaged, and yet she currently has not been given a leadership role.
No, and that's where kind of where we started because that was my response too, is that I saw like the Democratic Party is back, and my thought was like this was so not about that, and so not about you guys, right? Like you just this was not about you, and I'm kind of hoping the degree to which it wasn't about them, and actually the very loud, very strong pushback to those statements. There was a big response of people saying essentially what you said and what I said, which is, oh no. No, 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 this isn't about the party guys and it's not about you. Um, right, riding the election coattails after not adapting to the moment. Again, many people have been saying this for a long time, including me, is that we need to be rethinking our politics and how we practice them. And I don't mean policy, I mean modes of politicking. This is just a moment that demands different kinds of practices, different strategies, different ways of connecting with the people and putting the people front and center and not thinking simply from a top-down, networked, structural point of view. That to me is one of the things this election taught, but I cannot say, people who are entrenched in a system of politics that has been there forever and it's their entire world and career and most of their life has been spent in that system. I understand why that feels like the norm in all capital letters and why things that are different feel like weird exceptions. But I think we're in a moment where what it's easy to dismiss as a weird exception is actually potentially a new path better adapted to the times. I don't know. I was thinking recently, I would love to interview Mamdani as a political historian. I would love to
Mm,
interview him and just be like, ask him questions about the logic behind some of what he did, to get a sense of that kind of new thinking and what he did to begin to sort of collect a sense of where, you know, strategically, I'm not talking policy, but strategically how politicking might operate in a different kind of a way.
yeah.
Okay. Okay,
Okay.
I guess it's 7 minutes after. We should probably stop.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to explain what happens next?
I will explain what happens next. Okay, folks. So, and I do want to say KF. I don't know what KF stands for. It says, love this group platform for context, community, and broadening my perspective. I'm glad you said that because I feel that way every single freaking week. Okay, so here's what's going to happen now. We're going to go to the after party. What that means is that we will no longer be recording what we're doing here so that we can be even freer and easier in our conversation. If you joined us through NCHE, stay right where you are, and I'm hoping someone will say it.
Someone
Poof.
already did. Oof.
Okay, poof, poof. Thank you very much, Tim. You will be in the after party. If you beamed in through Facebook, you need to leave Facebook and go to ncheteach.org/conversations. That's ncheteach.org/conversations. And then you too, poof, will be in the after party. As we segue off in that direction, I do want to say, as I always say, thank you all for being here. Thank you to Annie. Thank you to Claire. Thank you to NCHE. Thank you for all, and particularly thankful to you guys all for being here week after week after week, for a bazillion million weeks. 290, is that what we started with? Like, holy moly. Is that it matters for a whole bunch of reasons. And one of the reasons that this matters is because it's an ongoing conversation in which we ask questions and come up with ways of thinking about things and don't necessarily have set answers. And that's the important part, is that we aren't just assuming things. We're actually working through things as a group. And in the same way that someone earlier said, I hope that each student of the 300 and whatever students in my class go off and tell one person to watch the video. If you guys go off and say to someone, let's have a conversation about X, or beam in and see this conversation about X, that can have a far reach, right? If you're taking these conversations and having these kinds of conversations with other people, that matters. So at any rate, I want to thank you all for being here. I'm going to ask Claire to send the questions that we didn't get to because there's so much to talk about. And oh, thank you. See, of course she already did.
Of course she did.
Of course she did. Okay, so I guess let me move this center screen. I guess we can go to the after party. Folks, those of you who don't stick around for the after party, have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful week. I will see you in a week. And who the heck knows what we'll be talking about. But I didn't necessarily assume that we would be where we are right now, talking about what we're talking about
I
now.
was hopeful.
I, I was hopeful.
I think it exceeded my expectations.
Well, I was gonna say yes. I was hopeful, but I was holding back and waiting to see. So
I didn't expect the entire map of Virginia, including the far southwest,
I know
to be all blue. That I might print that map out and frame it and hang it in my living room. That's how much I love
there
that
is
map.
online somewhere, the state of Virginia with blue sort
Yes,
of,
arrows. That's the one I'm talking about. Yes.
but it looks like a wave.
It
Look at
well,
it. It looks
it
like a
does.
wave.
It was a blue wave. It
Yeah.
was. Yeah.
Okay, anyway, let us go to the after party, and then if people want to talk about the marble bathroom, we can. But at any rate, I will see you guys next week. Yay, small d democracy.